The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. That day, as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side of the lake." Leaving the crowds, they took Jesus with them in a boat, just as he asked. The other boats were with them. However, a violent squall came up, and the waves were breaking over the boat so that it was already filling up with water. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this then, to whom even the wind and the sea obey?" The Gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, the first reading was Job, but you got to know a little bit of background between Job. First of all, Job's not a person. Job is a book of literature created by the Jews during a period that we call wisdom literature, and it was meant to teach a lesson. Basic line, why do bad things happen to good people? That's the basic theme of that book. But the way it's composed is very interesting. God is in dialogue with Satan. Again, it's a play, it's a story. It's not real, it's biblical, it's part of our scriptures, but Job is not a historical person. So God is in dialogue with the devil, and the devil says, you got people following you only because you take care of them. You give them money, you give them families, you give them names. That's why they follow you. But take some stuff away from them, then see if they'll follow you. And God says, that's not my job. They'll follow me because they have faith. Job says, let's take one. The devil says, let's take one. Let's take that guy down there, Job. Job is wealthy, nice family, crops, kids, everything. And the story goes on, little by little, he takes things away to test Job. Job just never gives in, never says, "Damn you, God, why are you taking all this stuff away from me?" Never gives in. To the end where he's literally sitting on a dung heap and makes that affirmation of faith, "I know my Redeemer lives." At one point during that acclamation, he really says to God, "Hey, what's going on?" And then we have the section that we heard today. It's very, very short, very beautiful. And basically, it gives us in 21st century a good perspective as to what God is and who God is. The other day I was listening to something on TV. I was just flicking around and they were talking about the astronomy and the sky, I guess with the shuttle going up and all that. And somebody said, I think we're about 6 billion years old. And that star that you're looking at is like, 7 billion years. And I'm thinking, Maron, billions we're talking about. So what does Job tell us today? God says to Job, "Hey, you weren't there when I created the universe. You weren't there when I put the lines that separate earth from water. You weren't there when I made a difference between the sun and the moon. And you're asking me why you're going through this suffering?" And then it hits Job. That's my Redeemer. I can't control God, and yet I'm trying to control God. Now, any one of us can put ourselves in that position. When things don't go our way, we try to control God. See, you got to be careful of prayer. Prayer is not making God's will my will, but following God's will so that I will follow his will. We don't pray to get God to change and become what I want. We pray so I can become more like God. That's a tough one. And that's the clearest message of the cross. He gave his life so that we could give ourselves to him and each other in a victory over death. That's that second reading, refers to that. And Paul says in the second reading, once you've been born into Christ, you're part of a new creation. So you can't think like the old way. But we do at times, because we're people. And I guess a real good example of thinking the old way is the gospel today of Mark. Jesus says we were in the Holy Land 2 years ago, and the lake that they call the Sea of Galilee is really a lake, but it's huge. And they took us out in the middle of it. Thank God it was calm weather. And we had a really good experience as to what the apostles may have experienced when they were on the lake, sometimes called Lake of Tiberias. But what happens is Jesus wants to go on the other side with his disciples, and Jesus always has something up his sleeve. And he goes out, and the winds come, and the waves come, and the boat's rocking back and forth, and they're screaming, and he's sleeping. Now, that's one thing I have in common with Jesus. I could probably sleep through a storm. He was sleeping on the end of the boat, and nothing affected him. Again, gospel is gospel. Gospel is not story. Gospel is good news. So Mark remembers this and remembers the story of the apostles. And they wake him up. Jesus, aren't you terrified? Look what's happening. And this is what we like about Jesus. Be calm, be still, and the wind stops. That's what we like about Jesus. We like to know about the Jesus who gets into the human conditions and gives us a different way of looking at things through his eyes, through his experience. We like to look at Jesus as the miracle worker, but that's only second to our faith in Jesus. Our faith in Jesus is, as Paul said, it's Jesus who is alive. Our faith in Jesus is the Jesus who is with us, the Jesus who challenges us. And we don't always like to be challenged. Do you think he liked that? I don't think he liked the cross. But he accepted the cross because it was a way of him showing you and me that in the 21st century, we're always going to have a cross, but we still have to hold on to our faith in God because he holds on to his faith in us. Yesterday we celebrated Juneteenth. It's almost like tongue-in-cheek we celebrate it. I mean, lately I've been reading a lot of history, African-American history, about colonies in New Jersey. That's where I'm originally from. And I can't believe, I guess we all know the history, we've all seen the movies, we've all read some of the documentation, but once you get into the heart of slavery, you can't believe how these people, because they came from a different continent and had darker skin, were treated like things. Things. I mean, not appreciated at all as human beings. And some remarkable event in the black community is consistent, and it's their faith in Jesus. I don't care if it's the Methodist Church, the Zion Church, the Bethel Church, but their faith in Jesus, and maybe that's where the Catholics missed out. We didn't get there. We have plenty of black Catholics and black churches, Catholic churches. We have patron saints of black Catholics. But during that time when slavery was pronounced in our country, you got to be realistic. We were always, I wasn't there. Our Catholic Church was still going through its struggles for identity. It's a colony, it's an English colony, it's an Anglican colony, and all those attributes. And Catholics were not welcome. So we were struggling for our own identity. But while that was happening, our black brothers and sisters were also struggling for their identity, and they weren't even referred to as brothers and sisters by white people. So when we celebrate something like Juneteenth, a lot of people are sarcastic about it. It's a day that we as a country mistakenly announced emancipation late. Yes, it was Abraham Lincoln who did some of the work, But all of us took 100 years or so to come forward and as a nation say, yes, our African American sisters and brothers are like us, they are free, but you know that's a lie. You know that's a lie. Most of us are white in this church, and you know it's a lie. You know we have fears, you know we have prejudices, you know we have anger. And give me one instance where a black kid does something wrong. See, they're all like that. Come on. That's our hearts being dragged down by Satan. That's the guy who's in dialogue with God. Our gospel is that Jesus is alive and he came for all of us. That Jesus is alive and expects us to live our lives with the cross. And you know, prejudice and hate are not crosses, they're sins. But some of us embrace those crosses. So we have to give up that cross and embrace that cross, the one Jesus is on. That's our ministry. No, our God is not asleep. He knows what you're doing. And he knows the troubled times that we have in our country, especially in the last decade. We've had a lot of troubles. But, you know, it goes back to the beginning. We've always had trouble. The church had trouble. The society has trouble. The world has trouble. But through all of it, our gospel teaches us that Jesus is not sleeping. He's aware of what's going on. And he says to the disciples, why are you terrified? You still don't understand? And you know what? If Jesus came today in the midst of our confusion as a society, he could say the same thing. Why are you terrified? Don't you understand I'm with you? And we get terrified on a personal level in our families when we experience death or illness or accidents, we get terrified. But also on a society level, we get terrified when things aren't going our way, when the balance of society is shifted, we get terrified. Jesus is saying, why are you terrified? I'm with you. The question is, are we with Jesus? The boat was filled with disciples and he's sleeping. This is the boat. You know, the other name for the church is the bark of Peter, the bark meaning the boat of Peter. So we're in this boat together, folks. And Jesus is not sleeping. He's reading every one of our hearts, and he's asking us to follow him, and he gives us the good news every week and every day as we read it as to what we need to follow him. His bottom line, and you know it, is love. The problem is living it.